Hey guys, my name is Ryan and welcome to Overwatch Central. I wanted to sit down and do a pro guide on the new Torbjorn, but to be honest, when it comes to playing this hero, it's much better to ask somebody like Fuey500. Today he goes through all of his best tips in order for you to improve and climb on new Torbjorn, and ultimately what you should know and be doing. You can find all of Fuey stuff in the description, and in the comments do let us know what hero you want us to cover next, and what person you'd like us to cover it with. Let's get started. So we've had you on the channel a couple of times now, Fuey. One thing that I did want to ask is, in a general sense, for those that don't main him or one-trick him to an extent, where would you and why would you want to play Torbjorn? Where is he really good?
So, in a general sense, the times you would want to play Torb is typically the maps that have these kind of like choke point areas and areas that like 2CP for instance for Hanamura, like point B when you're attacking, when people will generally just stall onto the point. Those two type of scenarios are really good because of A, he's an area denial hero, and if you deny the only place they can go, then they're just going to either take a ton of damage or they're going to be away from where you want them to be. And B, specifically, this is like a 2CP type of thing. When people keep stalling and coming back in, you are really able to build ult charge and stop them from doing that. Like typically, at least in some GM games, that can last like minutes. That could last like 2-3 minutes. People could keep stalling in and wasting time, and the timer keeps going down, because that's another important aspect of the game, is the timer itself, because even if you win fights, there's no time, it's gone. So generally I'd pick him as anti-stall. I would pick him for specific maps, aka like one of my favorites would be King's Row, because once you have the turret on the payload, you can heavily deny a lot of area because there's nowhere for them to move, so they're kind of just stuck there. So they're going to be stuck there taking damage from you, the turret, and when you have your ultimate up, since the ult's really good for covering decent chunks of area, you can deny all that area for them, and then they're just forced to either take damage or back away.
I mean, we'll be going through each of the abilities one by one, but just before we start going into stuff like the ultimates, you mentioned a turret, where you should place it. Are there any other general things that you want to sort of bring to people's attention if they do want to play more Torbjorn? Like, what stuff should they really be trying to do overall as this hero?
There's a couple of practices that I would personally suggest. One would be aim training specifically, whether it's in quick play or within practice range or custom games. I think practicing specifically the mouse one or the primary fire is very important, because learning that projectile will up your game with the character by a very large amount. For the right click, the secondary fire, generally speaking, there are very few situations where I would almost ever use it. The right click, it's kind of bad. The spread is bad for the right click. It's now actually changed to a star pattern. So instead of previously where it would be like a circle or random circle, now it's a star pattern. So this means that the points on the star, if you're too far away, they're going to end up missing. It got kind of a little bit of a damage nerf. And then one thing is that it also has fall off. Generally, I don't use the right click much. The only times I would ever use it is shields, because those, you can't really miss a shield as much. There's also a combo with Overload that I guess you could talk about in a bit, that you can use to maximize damage for shield breaking as well.
Now that we've gone over the primary and secondary fire, let's go over the new ability, Overload for Torbjorn. This was something that you said before as being one of the things that makes new Torbjorn really strong, and he is one of the best DPS in the game in terms of damage output. Now, do you still believe it's down to Overload, and how would you use this ability to get the most out of it?
Overload is really good, and some of the situations I'd use it in is like for dueling or for survival. And in general, like if you can use that to get a pick or two in Overwatch, generally speaking, if you get a pick, do a trade or more, it is very good, because your team is at a base numbers advantage. So if you can do that with Overload, with the increased attack speed, with the increased mobility, maybe you decided to flank and you ended up killing their supports or their backline, that's very, very good. So you can use it for when the enemies dive on you. And in general, like, it actually helps dual Pharahs a lot, and even Pharah Mercies. I've actually had like a decent amount of success where if I kind of play by the turret and I shoot a Mercy, say I get like one shot on her, now the turret's just pelting down the Mercy, and they don't, because they're in the air, they don't really have anywhere to hide. So with Overload, I can consistently get these shots that I really would have to put a lot of time in before, because the increased firing speed is really, really good. So it is a pretty good ability that can turn a lot of like the tides, so to speak.
Now I think one of the main areas is the Torbjorn turrets now. It's so much easier to set up and get set up in a lot of different positions. I guess the first thing really to go over is, what are the good positions for Torbjorn to throw his turret? Where would you, on a regular basis, try and maneuver them, depending on maps, of course?
Whenever I put a turret, I'll have like a little miniature checklist in my mind. Is that there's not really specific turret spots, more of a what's going on in the current situation, what do I want this turret to achieve, and what areas can it view. So for instance, sometimes when I'm playing with Crow, he will tell me, hey, we're getting dove a lot by Doomfist, so put a turret in the backline for pressure. So sometimes I'll whip a turret, not like anywhere particularly where the rest of the enemies are, but to help out my backline because they need the help. So having the turret as damage, having the turret as something that they can kind of hide behind and gather around, that also puts constant pressure on the flanker, is a good idea to set up there. But other turrets, so in general, like other turrets, if we play attack, it'll be one of two things. It'll either view over whatever my team is diving, whatever my team is going to attack, because a lot of dive comps are a thing now, or I'll just put it over the point, or our backline. So it'll view both. It'll view like a corner of the point, and it'll also view our backline in case they decide to dive our Ana, who's typically very often picks support now. Do I want to protect? Do I want to attack? In general, the biggest thing that comes down to with placing the turret is I want to know, what area do I want to protect? What do I want to protect?
And finally, I guess that leaves us with the ultimate. It's a nice thing for Torbjorn to have, does a lot more damage to armored targets. And then how would you use this ultimate, I guess?
The ult is good at a couple of things. It's kind of good at like area denial and like zoning out where they want to go. So one example would be Hanamura choke. If I don't want them to cross the choke point, I could ult, and if they do, they're taking a lot of damage. A lot of things that'll happen when I use the new core is that Lucios will pop their ultimates to try and help their team get by, because they don't want to sit there for the 20 seconds and more, so they can kind of just run through Lucio. But it can be used to stall, it can be used to deny area, it can be used for killing potential even, like locking someone in a corner. So for instance, one good example would be people that are forced to go on to a point. A lot of the points are generally, they're squares, so you can kind of lock them down into one of the corners of the squares on the point by just ulting around them and slowly pushing them into that corner, and then you can maybe ult on top of them. Even against one of the things that might be kind of hard for the ultimate and for people using it is shields. You can actually like ult into the air or bounce off of walls to try and get behind them and get that sweet spot in there. But you can even just ult in front of them because they still have to move forward. It's all about denying them from where they want to go and kind of less about killing potential. It can be used for a combination with Graviton as some decent kill potential, but by itself, most of the time you're not really trying to kill people as often as you are saying, hey, don't cross this area. You can use it for defense on your backline. If people are diving, if you ult, then your team's kind of got this pool of safety that they can stand in that the enemies can't. And that'll kind of like, that'll keep a lot of different characters away. Like, one instance is Genji's generally, they'll dash in, but if they dash in and then there's a pool of lava there, they can jump up in the air, but they kind of gotta stay away. In general, that's what I kind of use the ultimate for. I use it for denying people the space, denying area, and I think in general that's its best usage as an ultimate.
Pretty detailed stuff overall. Definitely is going to answer a lot of questions for those that want to pick up Torb, but are there any final things that you want to add at the end of this video that you think are definitely worth highlighting?
I think honestly the thing that are worth highlighting is that for somebody who's playing Torb and wants to get better, you should try and practice your primary fire as much as possible to try and get the maximum value out of it, because it is the lower ammo cost. It doesn't take doesn't have fall off damage. It's pretty fast now, and in general it does decent damage by itself. And another thing is, for turrets, as much as I suggest looking up turret spot videos out there, there's tons done by a lot of different Torb mains, including me. I think thinking about what you're doing when you're doing it and placing it based on the situation is far more important than placing it based off of some random guide. And then another thing would be Overload. Overload is a very good ability. It's very versatile, and it's also very situational. You can use it for defense, you can use it for flanking, you can use it for offense normally. It's pretty good. And then the goo, the Torb goo, you can use for a lot of different stuff. You can be pretty creative with it as well, so I would suggest people trying to at least go into quick play and learn the different types of things you can do with his ults, where you can shoot it, what you can bounce it off of, what way do they best succeed. Do they succeed at cornering people? Do they succeed at zoning people? Do they succeed at just spraying the payload, spraying their backline? I think people need to test a lot of these things out and specifically just practice them beforehand.
And finally, just to finish on, where can people find more of you wrestling less with the avoid his teammate and report options, no doubt, but where can people find more of you playing the new Torbjorn and no doubt doing quite a lot of damage, because new Torbjorn is a pretty good hero right now?
They can find me at twitch.tv/Fuey500, Twitter at Fuey500, and Fuey500 on YouTube.
And that's it for this time. Thank you very much for watching. You can find all of Fuey's stuff, as I said before, in the description. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe if you haven't already. And until next time, take care. We'll see you then.